Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Repeat Ron, and today we are going to be going over all of the Berserker weapons from worst to best. Now, let me start out by saying Berserker really doesn't have any bad weapons, so don't take this to mean that any weapon that scores low on this list is completely inferior and you can't use it at all. That's not true at all. Berserker is an incredibly strong class with pretty much nothing but decent weapons, if not great weapons. So Berserker currently has 15 weapons in total, and we're going to be going through each of them. So starting at number 15, the least useful weapon in my opinion with Berserker is the Fire Axe. The Fire Axe is a tier 2 Berserker weapon. This weighs 5. It does really high damage, doing 90 damage with its primary attack and 135 damage with its secondary attack, which is just amazing. It's not really a weapon that I go for a whole lot. It does do a lot of damage, and with upgrades it does scale well, but it still doesn't scale as well as other weapons that you could get later on, like the Battle Axe or the Zygander. I don't really see a point in taking it most of the time. That being said, it's not a bad weapon by any means. It still does way more than enough damage to kill pretty much everything in the game. It also has a somewhat slow swing speed, so you do have to get used to that. But overall, there's nothing really wrong with the Fire Axe. It's just the least good out of the weapons, in my opinion. Up next at number 14, we have the Crowball Survival Tool. This is your starting weapon with Berserker. This weapon is pretty good for the early wave. It does 49 damage with its primary slashing attack. It does 86 with its secondary attack, with its heavy attack, and with its bash attack, it barely does any damage. This only weighs 4, which is pretty nice. You can put it into any loadout that you would like. It does reasonably well with light and heavy attacks. It does have somewhat short reach compared to some of the other melee weapons. It does actually scale surprisingly well too with upgrades, getting pretty strong with its secondary attack and still having reasonably fast attacks. There's nothing really wrong about the Crowball. It's just it doesn't scale as well as some of the other weapons or have some of the other weapons' strengths that we're going to be talking about. So it lands here. At number 13, we have the Road Redeemer. This is a tier 2 weapon of Berserker. This is a DLC only weapon, and I'm not taking into account how much, the DLC value is to any player. This is just the weapon on its own, not including how good or bad the DLC might be. So if you're not into getting any of the DLCs, either through buying the games or buying just the DLC weapons themselves, then you could just put them all at the bottom of the list because you're probably never going to use them unless somebody else in the lobby has them. The Road Redeemer does 68 damage with its light attack, 90 damage with its heavy attack, and 68 damage with its bash attack. It has a pretty high attack speed. You can attack fairly quickly with the Road Redeemer. And once again, this is a weapon that doesn't really have any weaknesses to it. It's just not as strong as some of the other weapons later on. It doesn't scale incredibly well either. It scales all right. Mostly, you're going to be using this with light attacks rather than heavy attacks because light attacks attack so much quicker. At number 12, we have the Katana, which is pretty much in every way the same as the Road Redeemer. It also does 68 damage with its light attack, 90 damage with its heavy attack, and 68 damage with its stab attack. It has the same reach as the Road Redeemer, and it weighs the same at 4. The only difference is that this does slashing and piercing damage, as well as has a few extra moves like the draw cut that you can do with it. But other than that, it's practically the same as the Road Redeemer. So all of the strengths and the criticisms of the Road Redeemer also apply to the Katana, in my opinion. However, the Katana is not DLC, so I'm going to put it a little bit higher than the Road Redeemer because everybody has access to it. At number 11, we have the Tesla Launcher. This is one of your few ranged options. It holds 30 rounds. It weighs 7. With its secondary fire, it fires the Underbarrel Grenade Launcher, which fires out an EMP bomb. The EMP bomb adds the EMP status effect to everything that it hits nearby. This gun does have a pretty low rate of fire compared to most other assault rifle type guns. It does 68 damage a shot, plus doing afterburn damage because this does count as microwave damage. The EMP grenade actually hitting an enemy will do 50 damage, and then the EMP effect, I believe, doesn't do any damage. The EMP blast is also 3.5 meters, so you can hit everything within that range. This is not a bad weapon. It's a pretty good weapon if you wish to play as a more status-oriented Berserker, and that playstyle is very accommodating for newer players, as well as more advanced players who just want to play in a bit more of a safe way. It's great if you combine it with a melee weapon. That way you can still block and parry. It's probably best not to only have this weapon as like your only weapon for Berserker. It's better when paired with something else. Its upgrades scale it okay, and overall this isn't really a bad weapon at anything. It actually excels quite well against bosses because you actually have a ranged option then, and it does well at just statusing Zeds so that they cannot use their special ability. So overall, pretty solid weapon. Even though it's winding up in 11th place out of 15, there's just a lot of good Berserker weapons. Alright, coming in at number 10, we have the Vlad 1000 Nail Gun. This is a cross-perk weapon between Berserker and Support, and it is a fantastic little weapon. It weighs 5, it holds 42 rounds, it can fire either one nail at a time, or it can fire in a shotgun mode. It'll do 35 damage a nail. It can fire out 7 nails, so you can do a total of 245 damage if you connect with all of them. You can also ricochet the nails, which is pretty nice. Nails are extremely cheap, which is great. And this thing scales incredibly well. This is actually the very earliest you can get a semi-auto shotgun in the game, making it a pretty tempting option. And it's really good overall. It actually scales really well, and it's just a fantastic weapon. It is better paired with a melee weapon. And when you do that, it's a very solid option, but just as itself, it's not as useful. It's much better paired with a melee weapon, and it's not the best if you pair it with a ranged weapon. It's still not bad. It's still actually really good. It's just, it excels better in loadouts that use both melee and ranged options. At number 9, we have the Static Strikers. The Static Strikers are an extremely fun weapon. They are a tier 4 Berserker weapon. They weigh 7. With their light attacks, they do 95 damage. With their heavy attacks, they do 175 damage and apply an EMP effect. And with their bash attack, they do 100 damage. These do have shorter reach than most weapons at 1.5 meters, same as like the Crowball. They do scale alright with an upgrade. Mostly this is a good status affecting weapon. You can use it quite well just to kill really anything with it, but it pairs extremely well with the Tesla launcher, making it an all-status Berserker build. You can also pair this with off-perk weapons like medic assault rifles or just any medic weapon to heal, and then you'll be a status support medic, or you'll be a status support Berserker, which works very well. Again, with a lot of these Berserker weapons, there's really nothing wrong with the Static Strikers. I just don't think they're as good as some of the other weapons later on. Still not a bad option, though. Still actually a really good option if you take it with the Tesla launcher. I have been liking that combo a lot recently. At number 8, we have the Pulverizer, the shotgun hammer. This is a cross perk between Berserker and Demo. This is a tier 3 weapon. It weighs 6. It holds 5 rounds in it. Which is a little bit strange. With its light attack, it does 80 damage. With its heavy attack, it does 145 damage, unless the shotgun hammer is loaded, and then it does 383 damage, doing explosive damage, and its bash attack does 68 damage. This is a weapon that excels in just raw amounts of damage, doing extremely high amounts of damage to a single target or 2 targets around you, because the blast actually does have a 4-meter explosion radius, allowing you to kill a bunch of small things around you as well. The Pulverizer also scales okay with upgrades. It is a bit of a sluggish weapon. It doesn't swing particularly fast, as well as its light attacks are actually kind of annoying for me to use. Whenever I use them, I tend to just knock the enemies down rather than actually killing them. So its light attack damage seems pretty good on paper, but overall it feels pretty underwhelming. It's mostly for its huge amounts of damage with its heavy attack. Really being able to put the hurt on any large Zed or any boss, really, if you're allowed to get into range to hit them. At number 7, we have the Battle Axe. The Battle Axe is just devastating. It's a tier 5 Berserker weapon, so it can't have upgrades. It does 120 damage with its light attack, 250 damage with its heavy attack, and 101 damage with its stab attack. It has a 1.9 meter reach, so about standard reach for most melee weapons. This weapon does hit like a truck, but it also swings like a truck. It's very slow to swing. However, it's very devastating when you hit something with it. So that's kind of what scores it here. It also weighs 10, so you can't take all options with it. It does have some kind of glaring weaknesses, like its slow swing speed and its weight, but it does have some pretty amazing strengths, like just its raw damage. So that's what scores it here at number 7 of Berserker weapons. At number 6, we've got the Eviscerator. This is a tier 4 Berserker weapon. This weighs 9. It holds 5 rounds in it. It actually has some interesting numbers to it. So its secondary attack, where you use the chainsaw part of it, does 29 damage per tick that you hit something. This is really good for clearing out small things. It works really well against them, not so much against large enemies, but you can kind of use it that way. With its blade projectile, when you fire it with its primary fire, it does 300 damage. The blade can also go through multiple enemies, as well as bounce multiple times and land in walls, ceilings, floors, whatever it might be, and you can go pick up those blades, essentially giving you infinite ammo if you're willing to run around and pick up all your ammo, assuming it doesn't just bounce outside of the map where you can't grab it. The eviscerator is a great weapon against pretty much everything. You can block very well with it. You can kill small stuff with its secondary fire. You can kill large Zeds with its primary fire. And its stab, which, that's its push attack. So its bash attack is also pretty decent at 90 damage. It's all around a pretty solid option for fighting just about everything. With its upgrade, it does get on the heavier side. Even at 9, it's still pretty heavy, but going up to 10, it gets really heavy and your options become more and more limited with it. Coming up in 5th place, we have the Zygander. This is another DLC weapon. This is a tier 3 Berserker weapon. It does 85 damage with its light attack, 195 damage with its heavy attack, and 63 damage with its stab attack. Also having a 1.9 meter reach, so about the average. This weapon can be absolutely devastating towards most things. It actually has fairly fast heavy attacks and fairly fast light attacks as well, so it works well against pretty much everything. The one place that the Zygander doesn't excel at is upgrades. Its upgrades don't give it that much more damage and aren't as devastating as some of the other weapons if you choose to upgrade them. However, other than that, it's a fantastic weapon at doing pretty much everything, and that's why it lands here in 5th place. So coming into 4th place, we have the Bonecrusher. This is a tier 4 Berserker weapon. This is the Mason Shield. It weighs 8. It does 80 damage with its light attack, 165 damage with its heavy attack, and 175 damage with its bash attack. This does have a shorter reach than most melee weapons at 1.65 meters, at least for the mace itself, 1.45 meters for the shield. This weapon also has one upgrade, which is okay in terms of overall damage and everything, and going up to 9 weight isn't too bad. You can still use some weapons with it. Where it really excels, though, is just how well it can block and parry. That is the biggest strength of this weapon. This is the most defensive weapon that Berserker has, and probably the most defensive weapon in the entire game. It can also parry and block a surprisingly high amount of things in the game, even being able to parry things like the Patriarch's minigun, which is interesting. And it seems to have one of the larger parry and block windows allowed to you. I'm not sure if that's actually true, if it's similar with all weapons, or if the Bonecrusher just actually does have a larger parry and block window. But overall, it's a pretty solid weapon and no real downside to it, so it gets number 4. At number 3, we have the Ion Thruster. This is another DLC weapon that Berserker has. This is a tier 5 weapon, so it can't be upgraded. This weapon weighs 8, which is pretty nice. You can actually take quite a few other weapons with this. It does 92 damage with its light attack, 152 damage with its heavy attack, 85 damage with its stab attack, and 400 damage with its special attack. This weapon does have a special attack that you can charge up by hitting enemies with any of your attacks or blocking or parrying any enemy's attacks. This weapon also has longer reach than most other melee weapons at 2.4 meters. Unless you're using the special attack, then it doubles that to 4.8 meters, meaning that you can hit enemies much further than what you would normally think with most of the other Berserker weapons. Overall, this weapon is just fantastic at killing pretty much everything, and it really fits any playstyle. It's very good with light attacks, it's very good with heavy attacks. It's very good if you like to parry and block a whole lot. It's pretty good if you don't like to parry and block a whole lot because you have the extra reach. It's overall just a very solid weapon. It also does fire damage too. I should kind of mention that. So it finds its place here at number 3 out of all Berserker weapons. Number 2 on our list is the Frost Fang. This is another DLC weapon. This is a cross-perk weapon between Berserker and Support. This is a tier 3 lever-action shotgun with an axe attached to it that also does freezing damage. It weighs 7, it holds 6 rounds. With its melee attack, it does 75 damage unless the target is frozen, then it scales up to 185 damage per hit when the enemy is frozen. And you can attack fairly quick with this. You can also block with this weapon. With its ranged shot, it shoots out 7 frost pellets that do 30 damage apiece, so you can do 210 damage if you connect with all of them. It also has a fairly high rate of fire and a decent reload speed as well. This weapon is just all around great. This weapon also has the same reach as most other melee weapons at 1.9 meters, so the same as the Zygander, which is kind of crazy, but It is just overall an incredibly powerful weapon and an incredibly versatile weapon. Having the ability to freeze things, having a ranged weapon, having a melee weapon built into that, and having even more damage if an enemy gets frozen is great, as well as just being able to block while still firing at enemies is also really, really strong, especially for somebody like Berserker. It's overall just a fantastic weapon, and that's why it gets the number 2 spot for Berserker weapons. And then number 1, you guys probably seen this coming, it's the Hemo Clobber. This is a cross-perk weapon between Medic and Berserker, and it is absolutely devastating on Berserker. It only weighs 4, meaning that you can take any other weapon with it, which makes it an extremely versatile weapon. Its light attack does 80 damage with each hit. Its heavy attack does 130 damage unless it's loaded, and then it does 200 additional damage to that, causing a explosion of healing gas, which then poisons all enemies as well as heals all allies, including yourself. That's the big thing that makes this weapon so strong, is because you give Berserker even more sustain when Berserker is already incredibly tanky and has a lot of sustain. Its bash attack only does 40 damage, so pretty much never use the bash like with the Crowball and some of the other weapons that we've mentioned here. So this weapon doesn't scale incredibly well with upgrades. It's okay at scaling with upgrades. It doesn't need them. It's an incredibly strong weapon just as is, though, and probably Berserker's strongest weapon, which is why I put it in number 1 spot. So thank you guys so very much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. Tell me what your thoughts are down below. I'm sure there will be a whole bunch of resortings based on Berserker weapons, because Berserker weapons, as I stated at the start of this video, are so good, and I could really see myself moving these around on any given day. So tell me what your list is down below, or your thoughts are on the weapons. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Thank you guys so very much for coming out here and watching it. I really do appreciate it. And if you guys are new here, be sure that you get subscribed. That way you get notifications whenever I post anything or go live. And thank you guys so very much for watching. I will talk to all of you guys next time. And until then, stay cool and bye.